So, lots to unpack with this book. Let's start with, who is the ideal reader for this story?
I think that this book, I mean, I'm the ideal reader for this story.
Well, good news, you read it. So that's
Job done. This is a story that I needed when I was growing up. My father was an alcoholic, and his worst years were when I was slightly older than Georgia. But even as a teenager who had access to more information than Georgia does, it was a very isolating and shameful experience for me. And I wish that I had had this book or a book like it to help me feel less alone and to help give me hope and kind of like a roadmap for how to navigate this very treacherous time in my life. And so that's who I really wrote the book for, is those children who are impacted by alcoholism or other types of addiction. And really any kid who is at a point in their life where they've gone through a trauma and they're trying to figure out, am I going to deal with this in a way that's going to allow me to move forward positively in my life and heal, or am I going to deal with it in a way that is going to ultimately be self-destructive? Because I think those are the two competing instincts that we have when we are going through a trauma or we feel betrayed by somebody that we love.
Of course, even once that choice has been made, I assume that this is going to continue to be an issue for Georgia and for her father in some sense forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I obviously can't say too much about the ending, but I tried to construct the ending in a way that would do that dynamic justice. You know, you can't wrap addiction up in a happy ending and a neat bow and have it be an authentic story, because it is a lifelong affliction. And even in cases like my family's case, where we were fortunate enough that my dad was able to recover from his alcoholism, you know, that's still a part of our family history, and it echoes, it has ripple effects. And for my dad, that's always going to be, you know, he's always going to be an alcoholic.
So this is a little bit heady stuff for a middle grade novel. This is not Chocolate Factory territory. So what is a responsible way to discuss alcoholism in a middle grade novel that doesn't undercut the seriousness of it, without being so dark and covering some of the worst aspects that maybe would be inappropriate for the age level?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is super dark. I don't know if you remember what happened to all those kids, but I think it's way darker than my book.
To my conversation with Kyle Lukoff, he told me why I should stop using Roald Dahl as an example and made a pretty definitive case for it. I just can't help myself. I think it's because we were talking about England earlier.
Yeah, and I'm just, you know, he was a big part of my childhood reading. So I think all of my books have dealt with, like you said, like a heady issue, something that traditionally might have been excluded from the children's literature canon for being too dark for children to handle, which is just a really bad logic, because we know that there are millions of children who are living in households where somebody is wrestling with an addiction. And so if we say, oh, we can't expose the children to this kind of issue, you know, you're talking about a certain type of child when you make a statement like that. And that's a child that is fortunate enough not to have this as part of their life experience. But kids do go through dark things, and they need books that are about those dark things. And we need to, you know, to acknowledge the realities that they're living in. So I think it's really important to have books about a huge array of life experiences. But as you say, there does need to be room for hope and for levity. And the way that I tend to try to accomplish that in my books is to make sure that there is a very strong dose of adventure and mystery that is somewhat independent of whatever kind of issue-related journey the character is on, so that readers, both who are struggling with the same thing as the main character, but also, you know, just any reader who picks up the book, isn't going to be like totally overwhelmed by darkness, but they're going to see that, like, you know, as hard as that part of my life was when my dad and also my brother were really subsumed by their addictions, I had joy. Like, I had inside jokes with my friends, and I have, you know, really great memories from that time too. And so it's important to get the whole picture, and so that kids do have that sense of like hope and knowing that that it's okay to feel joy even when you're going through something really hard.
Now, how about Magic Island? Do you know where such an island is, and can we go there and make wishes?
I wish. Yeah, this was my first. How to Disappear Completely has some magical realism elements in it, but this was my first attempt at really like full out magical realism. And it was really hard. Like, I don't recommend it to writers who are just starting out, or, you know, I don't know, maybe it's easy for some people. It was difficult for me. But I found the idea of it really compelling because wishing, there's a difference between hope and wishing. And I think you always want to have hope, but you don't want to get stuck on wishing. You know, wishing is kind of like quicksand. Like, if you don't move past the wishing stage to the acting stage, nothing changes for you. And so that is what I'm trying to get at with this magical lake that seems like so alluring and so seductive and so wonderful and magical, but is also in some ways a trap that Georgia has to be very, very careful with.